the chance of you being able to meet Darkrai is probably really good as long as you sleep every day during the Cresselia vs Darkrai event. In this video, we're actually going to look at how event Drowsy power is calculated and whether you as a player is likely to get all of the rewards, some of the rewards, and whether it includes the 4.5 billion event Drowsy power in order to get Darkrai at rank 13. And what about rank 15 to get the max rank rewards, besides the candies that occur every 55 million thereafter? So to know whether you can get this 4.5 billion or 8.2 billion event Drowsy power, which sounds like a lot, it's in the billions. We need to look at how event Drowsy power is calculated, and it's a lot more complicated than it seemed at first, which wasn't even simple. So brace yourself, this video will be very number heavy. Having said that, the math concepts in here are relatively simple. It's mostly addition with a little bit of quadratics involved, but we won't get into that. I find the biggest problem is actually how they named the parameters. Let's get into it. Let's recap what we already know. During an event with event Drowsy power, over the course of the 2 weeks, you accumulate Drowsy power in this form, called the event Drowsy power. The only thing that does is it unlocks ranks for you to get the rewards. And if you click history, you'll be able to see the numbers you've been contributing to that event Drowsy power throughout the event. So here are my numbers. I've got these personal Drowsy powers and global Drowsy power. And quite literally, the event Drowsy power is just the sum of these two numbers for every single day up until the end of the event. Now, at the making of this video, we're about the halfway mark of the event. So logically, if I got about 2.7 billion event Drowsy power, am I expected to double that for the end of the event? Because this is the halfway mark. And therefore, for me, a semi-whale, I would most certainly get Darkrai, but not get the final 2 rewards. Well, to understand that, we actually have to know how these numbers are calculated in the personal Drowsy power and global Drowsy power. The global one being the most confusing. And after understanding how it's calculated, maybe we can predict what the next few days of Drowsy power will be, to see if we're going to do well enough to get all the rewards that we want. Now, personal Drowsy power is very simple. It is simply your session for that day, that Drowsy power. So for example, for day 1, I got 85 million personal Drowsy power. And that's because for 851 Snorlax strength, I get 100 sleep score, that is 85 million. And the same thing for day 2, 200 million comes from my Snorlax strength, which is 1.6 million, with 100 sleep score, and because I slept with Cresselia, which gives a bonus during this event, that's where my 200 million came from. So it is simply this session's Drowsy power. One concept you probably already understood, but I'm just going to explain it because it can come in handy in a moment when we explain global Drowsy power, is that notice that on day 1, my Snorlax strength is about 800,000. On day 2, it's about double that at 1.6 million. And because the event Drowsy power is the sum of the personal Drowsy power on day 1 and of day 2, notice that whatever I farmed on day 1, the 85 million Drowsy power, it rolls over into day 2 to be counted again. Meaning that every berry you feed in day 1 will reappear in day 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to contribute to the Drowsy power of that day. But each day's Drowsy power all contribute to the event Drowsy power. So any berry you farm on day 1 is worth 7 times more than any berry you farm on day 7. It's the same as saying you want to maximize your Drowsy power on day 1 during any week. It doesn't even have to be event, because that strength you farm on day 1 gets recurrently used throughout the 7 days of the week for all the sleep sessions. So you would keep improving and increasing your resources earned, your spawn seen, your sleep styles gained, etc. But that concept also applies in the form of event Drowsy power, because day 1 strength keeps repeating itself into the later parts of the week. That means it's crucial that your day 1 is as strong as it can possibly be because of how much value you can get out of it. Even if it means compromising day 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, day 1 has to be as strong as possible. I'm not saying forget about days 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. I'm saying they're all important, but not as important as day 1. I would rather get 200 million on day 1 and 0 on day 2 than 0 on day 1 and 200 million on day 2. because imagine if I had 200 million on that day 1, day 2 I would have 200 million again. All of it gets counted again, so in total my event Drowsy power is 400 million. Now before anyone corrects me, I do mean the strength farm. Of course, you can't actually directly farm Drowsy power, and also Drowsy power also includes the 1.2 times from Cresselia, which doesn't roll over into the next day. You have to use Cresselia every time in order to get that bonus 20%. It's the strength farm with berries and ingredients and etc. that you feed into Snorlax. That's what keeps stacking every day. But that also means that with your Snorlax strength, if it goes up linearly, let's say you farm about 850,000 strength every day like me, and you double that on day 2, triple that on day 3, while Snorlax strength is going up linearly, your personal Drowsy power also going up linearly, the event Drowsy power goes up more than linearly. And just bear with me for a moment, because I think this is important before explaining global Drowsy power. I've plugged in the numbers for the first 6 days of my event, my actual numbers. And we're gonna look at the day 1 to 6 progression of my personal Drowsy power. And I'd say that's largely linear. The main drop here is I forgot to use my Cresselia, but I think we can all agree that my Snorlax strength is increasing about the same amount every day. Now I'm going to remove the global Drowsy power here just to keep the equation simple. PDP is the personal Drowsy power and EDPN is the event Drowsy power of that day, but not the actual event Drowsy power, which requires you to add on the previous day as well. The actual event Drowsy power that displays in the game for day 2 would be day 2 plus day 1's personal Drowsy power, assuming GDP is 0, which is 285 million if we're only looking at the first 2 days, and then we keep adding on to that. And if we plot this on a chart, you'll see that the growth is more than linear. It's a bit more curvy than what we saw with just the personal Drowsy power. And again, that makes sense because again, day 2 Drowsy power reuses the Drowsy power from day 1, then it gets added to the event Drowsy power. This is a quadratic growth, a bit better than a linear growth, which is good news for most players. That's what we want. The actual quadratic formula to represent something like that has a form of x squared plus half x, but we're not going to go into that. We just need to see that there is a better than linear growth in the actual event Drowsy power these first 6 days. And it's largely due to the fact that the Drowsy power keeps stacking onto itself, and day 1's Drowsy power gets reused 7 times. Day 2's Drowsy power farmed in addition gets reused 6 times. Day 3's additional Drowsy power gets reused 4 times, etc. And if you haven't figured it out already, the event Drowsy power N, so the event Drowsy power difference of that day, is the sum of the personal Drowsy power and the global Drowsy power, which is this number here. It's not an important point, I'm just illustrating where all the numbers come in. However, the event Drowsy power is the sum of all of these numbers. Each one of these is the sum of these numbers. Okay, so I hope we're still on the same page. That was the more simple concept. It's mostly just addition. Let's talk about global Drowsy power now, because this is not intuitive at all. If we were to use the original news to understand global Drowsy power, it said something along the lines of the global Drowsy power is based on the global average of 2 days prior the personal Drowsy power across the globe. Now, I'm not sure if there was a mistranslation or something that went wrong in the writing of the news, but this doesn't appear to be the case. I mean, I do pretty well for day 1 of the event, farming 85 million Drowsy power, and I do things like I time travel, I use helper whistles. How is it that the average player got a higher Drowsy power than I did on Monday 2 days prior for my personal Drowsy power? So something wasn't quite adding up. And if you didn't quite understand why they have to delay it by 2 days, it's because of time zones. So everyone's going through Monday at a different time. So that in order to get the global average, they need to wait out 2 days in order to make sure everyone's cleared Monday so that they can calculate a global average. And just another side point is, if you didn't already know, global Drowsy power doesn't add to your session. It doesn't add to your actual Drowsy power of that session. It again simply only counts towards the rank rewards, even though it's called a Drowsy power. And one more confusing point about global Drowsy power, I just want to get out of the way before we actually talk about how confusing global Drowsy power is a communication problem. When I say global Drowsy power of Monday, at first you might interpret it as this number here that's given on Monday. But I could also mean the global drowsy power that's calculated on Monday, which gives you the global drowsy power of Wednesday. So I think we need to be extra careful when talking about global drowsy power, which day we're talking about. The day that it's used to calculate global drowsy power, or the day where the global drowsy power is given. I personally experienced this confusion myself when talking to members of my Discord. Alright, let's talk about what is that number that's given. As it turns out, this number here, the global drowsy power, is the previous day's global drowsy power plus the additional global average of that day to get this number. So it isn't the global average personal drowsy power of 2 days ago. It is the sum of all days prior to that day, personal drowsy power average across the globe. So you can actually work out the average global drowsy power by taking the difference of these two numbers or these two numbers for each day. In the Rainiacs website, you can click by day to see the difference, which gives you the actual global average 2 days ago. Now, ignoring that the first value is a bugged value, let's say 27 million on Monday, the global drowsy power. So this number here, that is the global average of Saturday the week before, because it's 2 days prior. That is the actual drowsy power averaged across the globe. On Sunday, it's 99 million. Because it's the difference of this number and this number to give you the global average drowsy power farmed on Sunday, so 2 days prior. And now it makes a lot more sense, so just bear with me a little longer here. You can see a huge drop in the drowsy power on Monday because we started a new week. So Wednesday's global drowsy power, if we take this number and minus this number, we get only 10 million, a lot less than the 100 million just before that, because this number is based on Sunday, this number is based on Monday, when it's displayed on Wednesday using the Monday calculation. In other words, if I'm a perfectly average player, these would be my actual personal drowsy powers, the actual personal drowsy powers starting from Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So using these more sensible numbers, now we can see how global drowsy power is calculated. The global drowsy power displayed in the game is this number plus this number. If you add them right now, you get about 126 million, which is what you see here. On the third day, you take the 10, you add it to the 126, so you should get 136, 137 million. For the fourth day, it's 160 million, which is the sum of this, and this to give you this number. Now, does that sound a bit familiar? We kind of went through that for personal drowsy power, but that was a discussion about strength. Strength gets recurrently used throughout the 7 days of a week to give you a quadratic growth in event drowsy power contributed by personal drowsy power. Global drowsy power is actually even better than that because, firstly, it uses drowsy power to add, meaning if everyone in the world used Cresselia every night, that actually stacks because we're not adding strength, we're adding drowsy power onto the next day. So while personal drowsy power can't stack the Cresselia 1.2 times bonus, global drowsy power can. Not that you have any control of it as an individual, but if everyone uses Cresselia, it stacks. So the displayed global drowsy power uses the global average drowsy power from 2 days ago, which is this number here, then adds every single number prior to that to give you this number, but then event drowsy power takes this number, adds it to this number, which by the way, this number is already the cumulative amount of the previous days, and then adds it to this number, adds it to this number, adds it to this number, adds it to this number in order to get the sum of all of these, which is this number. I hope you can see that global drowsy power will grow as a rate quicker than personal drowsy power because it's the sum of previous days. Personal drowsy power is just the drowsy power of that day, whereas global is the sum of previous days as well. So as a globally average player, I would always lag behind the numbers shown here compared to my personal drowsy power. So don't worry if this number overtakes this number, it doesn't mean you're doing worse than the average from 2 days ago. What's also an interesting point is this event started the Saturday before. Yes, we can't really control global drowsy power, but this truly started 2 days before because whatever we farmed on that Saturday, that 27 million, keeps stacking into the subsequent global drowsy powers. So if I could have control over the entire world, I would tell everyone to start farming high drowsy powers from the Saturday. Of course, that's not a really good tip because we also want to get lots of Cresselia downs during the event. So we want to be saving some of that strength for Monday. But that's just to illustrate the point. The event started 2 days before. So some people have said that the global drowsy power is there for the accumulation of previous global average drowsy powers. But to get the event drowsy power, it is the accumulation of this accumulation. So the sum of sums. And now going back to the actual displayed global drowsy power, you'll see that by the end of the event over the next 14 days, global drowsy power for most players will be much bigger than your personal drowsy power. By the end of the event, you might see 562 million on the day 14 global drowsy power. And then based on my linear prediction, and don't quote me on this, but this is just an estimate of what might come, and this is only a linear estimate. It's not the same as Rainonix's curved estimate. By the end of the event, I expect 4.4 billion global drowsy power contribution to the event drowsy power, which is very close to 4.5 billion needed for rank 13. In other words, you don't need to be really good at playing the event. As long as you sleep every night during this event, you get the global drowsy power of every night added to your event drowsy power during this event, you would come really close, if not cover all you need to get a Darkrai at rank 13. Meaning every personal drowsy power that you gain during the event is to attempt to get the last two rewards, rank 14 and 15. So that's really good news because that means almost everyone is guaranteed to see a Darkrai as long as you've slept throughout the event. And I think that might be by design because rank rewards seem to be something that they want to guarantee for all new players as well. They don't want them to miss out because the teams aren't very strong or they haven't got the right berries to farm a lot of strength throughout the event. So the next question is, well, how much personal drowsy power do I need to contribute to get to this amount in order to get all of the rewards? And again, this is a very rough estimate, but by my estimation, because 4.4 billion is contributed by global drowsy power, the remaining 3.8 billion will have to come from personal drowsy power. Divide that throughout the 14 days and also account for the fact that you can put Cresselia for 1.2 times drowsy power, which you should every night, and also divide it by 100 because we expect 100 sleep score every night. You would need about 460,000 increase in strength every day from your berries, dishes, skills, add it to the Snorlax and ensure you do use Cresselia every night. If you forget to use Cresselia every night, it'll be about 550,000 strength. And the way to know whether you're meeting that requirement is to actually go back to your sleep data and see how much you're farming every day. So this is my day 1, I farm 850,000 strength. Day 2, I farm an additional about 800,000 to get 1.6 million. So I'm well and truly above what's needed to get to the final rank. Now, I've already accounted for the fact that second week starts with the strongest Snorlax, so this is still the average you need. But thankfully, what happens on the last 2 days of the Cresselia versus Darkrai event is there's good sleep day, meaning that you're going to see a huge jump in your numbers. So make sure you do as well as you can in the second week to make the most out of that. So if you're slightly below this average, you might still make the final reward thanks to the good sleep days. Thank you for watching, guys. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and good luck with the event.